Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because you talk about the fact that so many women are turning to these communities and to other, individuals who may not have certifications to give them the advice based on what worked for them personally. We have seen this proliferate in women's health right now. Part of it goes back to the fact that we as a society don't talk about women's health, and so women don't feel comfortable. But it also goes to the fact that sometimes providers don't have the training to give women what they need on a particular topic, especially in menopause. And because of that, right, then you're forced to kind of go and self-diagnose, self-regulate with, finding answers through communities and trying things on your own. And some of the information is good. And then you have some of the information, right, that's completely off base, that can actually be, misinformation or harmful.
I'm Philippa. In this podcast, me and my generous guests delve deep into the world of menopause. Buckle up and get ready to embark on a journey of empowerment and self-discovery as we embrace the change. Welcome to Moving Through Menopause. Welcome to Moving Through Menopause with me, Philippa. And today I'm really excited to be chatting with Bethany Corbin. Bethany's coming all the way from the United States. Aren't you, Bethany?
I am, and I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So today we're talking a little bit outside my comfort zone, perhaps. We're talking about legal affairs, and I did mention that this is something that kind of makes me shiver and worry sometimes a little bit. I suppose I could call myself a startup, couldn't I? I started up this business 3 years ago and never having done anything like it ever before. I'd always really worked for other people, and I think we tend to rely on them to check the boxes and do all of that, the legal boxes, that is. So Bethany is an attorney, that's what they call them in America, a lawyer, I think, also in America. We might call her a lawyer. And so Bethany specializes in working with startups to help them cross those legal T's and dot the I's and make it a little bit less frightening, I suppose, don't you?
I try to, yes. We're never anybody's favorite person to talk to, especially startup companies.
Well, you look very friendly, actually, so I don't think I'd be too frightened to talk to you. But, the reason we're chatting here on Moving Through Menopause is that because I suppose in the course of your work, you've come across a lot of innovators in this field of technology, now known as Femtech. It's a relatively new term. I like it, women and technology, put it together, and what do you get? Tech, yes, I like that. So we're talking about all the kinds of things, well, I say all, some, maybe not all, some of the things that we might be encountering in that online world. And you know what, Bethany, I've got a little story about this. My husband at the weekend was looking up snoring devices. I'm laughing because there's only one reason my husband was looking up snoring devices, isn't there? It wasn't his idea, it was mine. Anyway, we're doing this trawl of the internet, like you do when you're trying to find solutions for health issues or, whatever it is. You're looking for solutions. And we came upon this solution, which was purported to be NHS, and that's our National Health Service here in the UK. Oh, NHS endorsed or something like that, And yes, on further investigation, there was no evidence at all that this was in fact the case. So some companies might be guilty of making bogus claims and misleading us on purpose. I don't know if I should even say that out loud, but I just did. So the idea that reviews was the other thing we were trying to interrogate, all these positive reviews that supposedly were in existence and yet seems to be somewhat lacking when we tried to interrogate this. So is this an example of the kind of pitfalls that might befall us as we're going about this online arena?
It absolutely is, and I work specifically in the healthcare field working with Femtech, which for those who aren't familiar with the term, because it is relatively new, it was coined in 2016. It's
Mhm.
really focused on any type of healthcare solution that's dedicated to or can impact positively women's healthcare. And
Like
so
snoring. Sorry.
and it's interesting, right? Because a lot of what we see in femtech is applicable much more broadly to other consumer devices, health tech in general, the snoring machines that you're talking about. And there's a couple of issues that we see here. The first one is just what you mentioned. Is this something that's even been endorsed? Like it said, it has been endorsed. Is this something where the reviews that we're seeing are actual people reviewing these products? Are they paid or sponsored reviews? Oftentimes, right? They're not going to disclose that. And then the other thing that we really have to think about are the accuracy concerns that come with these devices. We see this, for instance, in femtech. There's a lot of, for premenopausal women, right? A lot of ovulation and period tracking apps on the market today. If you dive into the statistics behind those, we actually see that none of them that have been tested by research institutions have been accurately able to predict the fertile window and ovulation, and the best accuracy rates like 21%. But none
Wow.
of that is being disclosed to consumers. And consumers right now, especially given the potential lack of regulation of some of these devices and the how quickly they come to market, consumers don't even have a way to compare one device against another based on
Mhm.
accuracy concerns.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole, the comparing like with like, invariably that's not the case, is it? So you're quite right to bring us back to the women's health side of the house, because to be honest, I'd almost forgotten about ovulation being a thing because of being currently postmenopausal. I say currently, I mean that's for the rest of my life, isn't it? But but yeah, that's definitely something that women are resorting to, to predict fertility. And I've got a question here, actually. Is this an app that you're familiar with called Natural Cycles? Is that one you've heard of?
Yes, have heard of that.
And is that, do we have any opinions on that? Are we allowed to have any opinions on that?
Yeah, natural cycles is interesting because it is actually the FDA's first approved, kind of non-hormonal contraception. So it's
Oh.
interesting. It is an FDA approved product. The thing about it though is, just because something is FDA approved or is, approved by the regulatory bodies in other jurisdictions doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate. And natural cycles had, a period of time earlier, whenever they first came out, that a huge number, I think they were Swiss or Swedish women, were actually getting pregnant, even though they were using natural cycles. And it was
Okay.
like 37 women, I want to say, had gotten pregnant. So yes, it's great for something to be approved. Usually that approval is focusing on safety and efficacy to a certain point. But even if something has been approved, there's still the potential and the risks that come along with those products and those devices. And, it's very difficult, for something to be 100% effective. Really keeping that in mind. And, I know Natural Cycles has improved since then. But yeah, and it's interesting too because Natural Cycles is also getting into, some really cool partnerships with other femtech and health tech companies out there. So there's now more ways in which to integrate like your natural cycle data with things like, I don't think they have the Apple Watch one yet, but maybe like the Aura Ring or other, health tech trackers. And so they've actually started to see a big boost in the number of female users for more general health tech products based on the partnerships that they're doing with women's health companies and companies like Natural Cycles.
Oh, well, that's interesting. It's not one that I've heard of, probably because of my demographic, like we're saying. But 98% effective now is what Faye Chapman's telling me. So, they've obviously improved. But I think the integrations is what we're seeing a lot more of, isn't it? This the partnerships between companies that sort of sensibly align
Mhm.
together. I mean, the tech that I can think of really is around women's health and in talking about pelvic health in particular.
Yeah.
So there is a whole host of devices that we can use to help and support our pelvic health. And some of those, I mean, there's an absolute mushroom of devices on the market, so much so that physiotherapists who specialize in this area really cannot keep up.
No
With
one can
all.
keep up.
No one can. Oh, well, that's a relief. It's not just me.
It's not just, it's very difficult even for healthcare providers across the world to keep up with how many apps are coming on the market. And truth be told, it's also difficult when we have kind of a lack of standardization for femtech and health tech in general to know whether or not that's going to be data that your clinician, right, or your provider can use in actually formulating your care and your treatment plan longer term. So we still right now actually have a bit of a divide between the tech founders who are creating these products that consumers are using and the actual clinicians and medical and scientific backing for those devices. So that's kind of been a huge problem that we're still trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah, there's a real disconnect there, isn't there? Undoubtedly. Yeah, as a clinician, people come to you and they've brought a device that they've purchased online and they're asking you, how should I be using this thing? And you may never have encountered it. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for us taking our health into our own hands. This is definitely something that I advocate for women. That is, be the master of your own destiny. But equally, we can come a little bit unstuck, can't we? If this stuff is so difficult to be sure that it's proven. It's I mean, all sorts of things that you can use for snoring. Anyway, I'm back to snoring. And yet there's all kinds of different things. You could find yourself spending a whole lot of money on something that really does nothing.
Unfortunately, that's what happens, especially in women's health, because women's health has been neglected through modern medicine for so long. And so a lot of times, right, we've been relegated to the shadows and the corners for discussing our women's health issues. We're not, in a society that promotes open discourse about women's health. And so a lot of women are afraid to talk to their healthcare providers, or when they talk to their healthcare providers, the providers may not be up to date on the newest solutions, or they may not know how scientifically or medically backed a particular solution is in order to be able to recommend it. And so for those reasons, a lot of women are turning and doing their own research on Google, on sites, on blogs, talking to other women in different communities that they can find online, and having to do a lot of kind of self-diagnosis, self-medication, trying to figure out which products could work for them. And just given that environment, there are unfortunately, a lot of predatory companies out there that offer solutions that really don't do anything for women. And as consumers in this realm, it's very difficult for us to distinguish which companies actually are going to be medically useful for us versus the ones that are out there to get a profit, because we're not equipped with the tools that would allow us to actually compare the products that are on the market. So that can be very difficult and frustrating as a consumer, particularly when we are having to exchange things like our most intimate data in exchange for those algorithmic predictions through the applications.
Oh, yes. Well, you mentioned hot potato there, I think, didn't you? The fact that this information is floating around in the public domain. And, people, it can be used against us, can't it? Definitely. My inbox is full of a whole load of emails that I could happily live without. People trying to get money out of you one way or another, beg, steal, or borrow, But coming back to, women's health and women's hormones, I think the thing that lots of people find so difficult is understanding, what's normal even for a woman. And so we start to, some women may never have had baseline data against which to compare what's happening as we transition through life, whether it is around reproduction or whether it is this transition to menopause. So, the idea that it's symptom relief is what drives the decision making, really makes that quite subject to abuse, doesn't it?
It does. And here's the thing too, right? Companies are starting to wise up that women make 80% of healthcare purchasing decisions throughout the world. So we're a hugely untapped market when it comes to the new devices and the new products that are coming out for healthcare. Given that, there are unfortunately companies who are now trying to step in and take advantage of our purchasing powers. And because of that, we're starting to see more and more companies start to race to market to get there quickly, to provide apps and supplements and other solutions that don't necessarily work. And they're able to do it. And it's very interesting, because when consumers are trying to even look at the, accuracy or the suitability of a product, for instance, like the snoring, like you were mentioning, what we oftentimes see is kind of some deceptive practices that can happen, not just in femtech, but with health tech generally. Let's say, for instance, you want to look at a product and you go on and you look at the website and you see they have a really cool advisory team that includes, top names that you might hear in the field. What we don't even know as consumers is, well, how active are those people really in developing a product? I had a client that I worked with once who had a very impressive advisory board member who he had one conversation with in 2 years, but still had somehow listed her as an advisory board member. So even when we're doing our diligence as consumers to look into these products, there's still sometimes some deceptive practices out there that make it difficult for us to determine what's really going to work. And that's why we've seen, especially in menopause, a ton of money being flooded into the supplement market to try to get rid of things like hot flashes or other symptoms that women have, with very little success in most of the cases.
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother minefield, isn't it? Because again, a totally unregulated industry, which, oh gosh, yeah, it's not my sphere, nutrition. I'm not a nutritional therapist. I'm a physiotherapist. I deal with movement as medicine. That's what I do. But yeah, well, and then of course people are making lots of claims around, different modes of training the body. For instance, do this and it's going to cure that.
Yeah, exactly.
And sounds too good to be true.
And it's interesting because a lot of times companies that make those claims, especially if they're doing it with supplements or with products or devices that haven't been approved, they're potentially violating regulations that are in existence to prevent that exact type of advertising to mislead consumers. So I've worked with clients in the femtech space, for instance, who have done similar things. This will cure this will relieve pain, claims that they have no scientific backing for. What I've also seen, and I was having a conversation with somebody about this the other week, is companies that come on and they say, this has been clinically proven to do X, Y, Z. What they might mean is not that, our app has been clinically proven to do this, but one part of the methodology that we use may have been clinically proven to do this in one study at one point in time. And now we've integrated that into this whole app, but we're still making those claims. And that can also be very misleading to consumers.
Yeah. Well, you're presenting me with a whole load of kind of doubts and concerns here. So, what can we say to consumers that can help them to be canny about these purchasing choices that they make? Do you have any key recommendations that you can pass along?
Sure. And it's interesting, depending on what aspect you're looking at and what type of product you're looking at, can really influence the type of data that you're able to obtain to make an informed decision. The first thing I always tell consumers is if you're doing something in an app or something that's connected to the internet, you should assume that whatever data you input there is going to be at some point in time disclosed downstream or sold for advertising purposes, something like that. Because a lot of times companies have privacy policies where they will tell you how they're using your data. And if you look at those privacy policies, most of the time they'll have some type of downstream disclosure, like we're going to use it with our business partners. We're going to use your data with our advertisers. In the US, for instance, one of the big ones is selling that data to data brokers, which, there's no kind of downstream limits on how your data can be used. So I always first off say, if you're going to use an app, great. Make sure that you're kind of weighing the types of data it's going to ask you for with the results that you're anticipating to get from that application, and make sure that that's a beneficial trade-off for you. The other thing consumers can do on that point is there have actually been some studies now that are starting to be done that kind of compare the data hungriness of the application. And so by data hungriness, I mean, how much data is it collecting versus how much data does it kind of need to be able to give you those same algorithmic predictions or outcomes from the app. And what they found is, unsurprisingly, some of the bigger name applications out there are collecting more data than they need. And because of that, right, that puts more of your data at risk. And so we're starting to get studies there that consumers can Google. Surfshark is one of them that does those types of studies. And it can just give you a sense for how much data is the app that you're using collecting. So that's kind of one thing, just be thinking about kind of data privacy. The other thing I tell consumers too is, to the extent that you can, see if the company is being transparent about the medical and scientific backing for their product. A lot of times companies, are not transparent on the websites because they claim it's proprietary, right? Confidential and proprietary. We don't want to give away our trade secrets. But if you're using something that's been medically or scientifically established, then what are the steps that you've taken? Are you doing clinical studies on it? Are you publishing journal articles to prove your methodology? Looking into seeing kind of what the company's been doing with respect to the scientific and medical backing for that product can be really helpful in determining if this is something that's actually going to be medically beneficial versus whether or not it's a product that you might be wasting your money and your time with and can actually be, siphoning off your data without you getting any type of benefit. So that's kind of another one that I always like to think about. And then to the other extent that, you can look at the company and kind of the team that they have. I always look to see how diverse of a team they have, especially kind of on their C-suite. How's the diversity, right? If it's a product that's created by all men and all white men, okay, that tells me something. Maybe they're incorporating diversity somewhere else, maybe an advisory team, but that's also kind of a red flag because I want a product that's going to know, right, my body, what I've gone through as a woman, and also going to be usable across diverse audiences. So I check out the diversity, I check out the background of the C-suite team to make sure that there's at least somebody with medical or scientific or research background. And as long as I'm able to kind of find that, I can feel more comfortable, right? It's not going to be a foolproof, but I can feel more comfortable that at least maybe this product has some scientific backing.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what the heck a C-suite is. What's going on there?
Yeah, when I say C-suite, I mean their executive team, their corporate executive team, right? Like who's their CEO, who's their chief product officer, chief technology officer, what's their CFO doing? Do they have a chief medical officer? Those types of chief positions, those are what I'm looking for. I'll also look, if they have a board of directors, I'll look at that as well. Advisory teams can sometimes be difficult just because you don't know how involved the advisory team is. Maybe it's a once a quarter meeting, maybe it's once a month. So, but I do also look, some companies, let's say that they're starting out and they don't have the money for a chief medical officer. Maybe they have an advisory board that's full of doctors, right? That can be something that can also help give, some credibility to what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, I think what's happening a lot nowadays, however, is that people are seeking out people, like a bit like you said, communities of people, the influencers who are doling out advice left, right, and centre. And so, how is that regulated? Because in my experience, well, there I just hit the nail on the head, because this is what we're talking about. People who have worked with other people and find that there's a commonality. So, it might be that some people find that taking a particular supplement helps menopause symptoms. Okay, so I took supplements when I was traversing menopausal hot flashes and oh my God, breast pain. It was really horrendous. And so it's very tempting for me to kind of hand out advice. I took this and it really helped, and I took that and it really helped. And I'm a sort of, what do they call it? An N of one. If it was a research project, I am it, and it's just me, and how transferable that is across the population of a whole, as a whole, and there's a whole lot of smoke and mirrors can be encountered there, because we've got placebo. I mean, placebo is massive, isn't it? So, I certainly stick to my, what do we call it? Not code of practice, the skills that I am trained to deliver. And I deliver those skills to the people that I work with. And if they wanted nutritional advice, then I'd send them to a nutritional therapist who's qualified in that kind of, that's their territory. And so those kinds of partnerships where you've got, somebody who specializes in an AM area, working with somebody else, a nutritional therapist, like a physiotherapist, a nutritional therapist. And then the other piece of the puzzle that I talk about, food, movement, and the mind. So, and there's been a whole mushrooming of technology in and around this area of the body, the mind, everything coming from the mind, whether it's mood, cognition, the way in which our brain works or doesn't some of the time. And it really is important to that we can work together with people and present a comprehensive package of care. But that can be difficult when you're a practitioner working independently, and there's lots of us out there who are, for the greater good, we're all trying to do our part to make women's lives better. And absolutely, we need to interrogate people's qualifications and their sphere of expertise, and that is absolutely important. So, but that's really hard to regulate, isn't it? I imagine.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because you talk about the fact that so many women are turning to these communities and to other, individuals who may not have certifications to give them the advice based on what worked for them personally. We have seen this proliferate in women's health right now. And, part of it goes back to the fact that we as a society don't talk about women's health. And so women don't feel comfortable talking about it, with people who might be closest to them and also their providers. But it also goes to the fact that sometimes providers don't have the training to give women what they need on a particular topic. And we've started to see that, especially in menopause. In the US, for instance, most clinicians get 4 hours of training or less in menopause during their medical school. And very few take any type of continuing education courses afterwards related to menopause. And so that can be really difficult, right? If you're going to your healthcare provider who doesn't even know about menopause or how best to treat it, and then you end up getting dismissed. And that makes it so that you kind of have a bad interpretation of your interaction with the physician. It then makes you less trustworthy of talking to other clinicians. And because of that, right, then you're forced to kind of go and self-diagnose, self-regulate with, finding answers through communities and trying things on your own. And so that goes to kind of the larger systemic problem of, how are we training clinicians for women's health care? Why are so many women getting dismissed when they go to their healthcare providers with these concerns? And once, definitely still need to fix, the underlying assumptions that we have about women's health from a societal perspective, the shaming, the stigma, and taboo goes with it, but also need to address it at kind of that clinical level. Because if women know and understand that they can get the help that they actually need from their clinicians, they'll start going there and getting that, personalized attention based on their symptoms, based on their own unique bodies. But we don't have that trust in our clinical networks right now. And that's fueling a lot of the communications that we're seeing on, these kind of communities and platforms. And some of the information is good. And then you have some of the information, right, that's completely off base, that can actually be, misinformation or harmful. And so that, as a woman too, how do you sort through that information? It can be very difficult.
Yeah, that is the bottom line, really, that this mismatch in the education of our clinicians. I mean, it goes the same for their training when it comes to nutrition. Historically, that was really sadly lacking.
Yeah.
So holistic approaches to health and lifestyle medicine is not something that we've been encountering with our conventional Western medical practitioners, the doctors that we see, which, and I think there's a real lag there because of how long it takes to institute changes in the way in which they are educated. So we've still got a bit of time to go before the next generation of practitioners is hitting the consulting rooms. So in the meantime, we are picking our way through this what can be a very challenging time for women. And so it's wonderful that you're out there helping businesses to make sure that they are delivering the promises that they make in a way that is appropriate, and all above board, and helping us to navigate our way around the system and not to get taken in, because honestly, we get really desperate. There are times when you feel so desperate that you would, if standing on your head and drinking something upside down would work, you would do it. Because, that's how desperate you feel. So I guess having a supportive community of people who seem, who have the appropriate qualifications, but equally the experience speaks volumes. Actually, dealing with the problems over a long period of time, we see parallels, and we have that opportunity to say, oh well, it wasn't just that this worked for me, but but that this has worked for thousands of women, and that's what we want, really, to be using the strategies, the supplements, the technology that has worked well for lots and lots of women. And then, we start to iron out the what you call them, outliers, get those out of the equation. But yeah, it is a total, that's not the way my mind works, to look out loopholes and try and fill them, or gaps. That's not my experience. But we know that those people, those businesses are out there, and for us not to fall foul of bogus claims, that old adage, if it sounds too good to be true, then the chances are it probably is. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, especially if you have products, that are supplements, or, that have not been clinically tested, right? Making those claims that they can cure certain conditions, right? They can help with XYZ symptoms. They've been quote unquote proven to do XYZ. All of those claims, it's hard because as consumers, you see them and you think, great, I finally found something that's going to be able to help me. And then if you start digging into it, and you're usually able to find a lot of holes, oh, it says it's proven, but where's the evidence? Oh, there isn't any evidence. Maybe there was one pain study 20 years ago that used half of this similar methodology. But as consumers, we don't have time to start digging into that, right? And spending our time looking at the science behind each of these products to see if they're going to be legitimate. And that's what companies are counting on too. No easy way to compare these, the supplements and the apps that are out there. And because of that, companies know. And they know that spending the time to potentially make something that's scientifically tested, scientifically backed, et cetera, that may not show as much return on an investment for consumers to be differentiated in the market for them to make the return that they need. And so even from that, when we think about an incentive for companies to be making products that are clinically tested and scientifically backed, what's the incentive if we as consumers can't tell and we can't make those informed decisions? And so it's almost like a chicken and egg situation there, where we can't make any informed decisions because we don't have the evidence and the testing that we need as consumers. And so therefore we're not going to get enhanced scientific products because how are we going to tell? How's that company going to recoup all of the money that it spent to undergo clinical testing and clinical trials when right now we're all using, a different product on the market that hasn't been clinically tested? So there's a lot of that that's happening in health tech and in femtech as well right now. And then you also kind of have the tension. A lot of these companies, especially in femtech, are earlier stage startups. It's only been around since 2016. So we don't have a lot of, huge unicorn companies right now that are out there. Because of that, a lot of these companies do have some early stage or venture capital backing into them. And so there can sometimes be a tension between a founder, right, who wants to create a scientifically backed clinical product and the investor who says, hey, get to market, get this product out there. Let's go. We have consumers who need this. We'll work on the clinical testing for the next iteration of the product. And so sometimes there can be that type of tension, especially if founders haven't chosen investors that have the same passion for women's health and the same passion for their mission.
Yeah. So the financial drive is driving the decision making.
No, I was actually, it was interesting. I was talking with a venture capitalist a couple of weeks ago, and what she said was, we don't want to invest right now in companies that have to go through the FDA or regulatory processes in other countries because it's going to take so long for us to recoup our investment and recoup our money. We want to focus right now on things like those healthcare apps that can get to market quickly and we can see a faster return on investment. So that's even, harmful for women's health because now we're not going to get the investment that we need in those longer term solutions and strategies that have the clinical backing.
Yeah. I mean, this incentive for companies to do the homework and to come up with, products that are not just novel but actually work is sadly lacking. And the one thing that I was feeling a degree of promise in, and somebody listening has mentioned this, and that's the Zoe study. So you may not have heard of this, but it kind of blossomed during COVID that they were collecting lots of data about, every week you could make a report. Have you had COVID symptoms? And because of the fact that there was a desire for us as a populace to kind of get to the bottom of this COVID thing, So people really got on board, I think, with reporting. And so obviously, as you say, there's some data collection that goes on, but that they do now seem to be branching out and exploring other avenues because they have an engaged client base. I mean, it's free. It's not anything you pay for. They've got an engaged community of people who and access to numbers of people that previously, up until that point, was almost unheard of. Conducting those research studies on vast numbers of people was very difficult to do, and so now they're kind of branching out and exploring different avenues. And the one that was published most recently, they did a study around intermittent fasting and the benefits or the disadvantages of doing that. Because again, this is maybe, well, there are apps associated with this, aren't there, that you can monitor your ins and outs and all of that, using various apps. So you can, there is money to be had, but they seem to be really quite invested in continuing to conduct research trials. And I was really hoping very much that they would jump on the menopause bandwagon and do some work around that. So fingers crossed that Zoe are listening, watching, and they can get to work helping us to fix the menopause mayhem that is a woman's lot. And regardless of whether you suffer symptoms, no woman is immune to the fact that our estrogen levels are going to go into a nosedive at some point, and sometimes sooner than you might be expecting. So, well, thank you, Bethany, so much for coming along and having a chat with us. I hope that people are not discouraged from continuing on their own health journey. And just really, we just need to be smart about this stuff, don't we? That, that's the bottom line. To get smart and do your homework, and and not just in sheer desperation, the first thing that you find, jump on that. Really do your homework and be your own advocate. Get wise to it, because at the end of the day, what we're saying is the medical profession is currently a little bit behind on this, and we're kind of waiting for them to catch up. And hopefully there's an appetite for that, and it won't take them too long to do it. But
I will say that menopause is kind of the next frontier that we're seeing in Femtech. So that's really started to blossom on the Femtech side since about 2022. We've seen, some celebrities mentioning menopause and getting involved with investment into companies. So I definitely think we're going to see some movement on that menopause needle. We already have. There's some great, telehealth companies that are coming out focusing just on menopause, new apps, new wearables, new devices to deal with hot flashes. So I'm encouraged by what we're going to see. And I think as women, the more that we can get out and talk and be open about the health issues that we're facing, the faster we can break down the stigmas and the taboos, and the faster we can get that data that we need on women's healthcare.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, I think they've realized that these women who are approaching menopause, we've not all got grey hair and about to sit down in the rocking chair. We're thriving women who are busy contributing to the economy, and we need help, and that's not a negative thing in any way, shape or form. So, well, thank you so much for your passion for women's health and Femtech and all the work that you do, helping to bring these companies to market safely, and applying all the necessary legal rigor to that process. So thank you so much, Bethany. I look forward to keeping in touch. And if anybody's got any questions, I'll be sharing Bethany's information in the podcast when it's published. So, let us know if you've got questions or queries. And for now, thank you so much. Take care, and bye for now.